Andy, nowhere else does pent-up demand show up than people talking about their plans for vacations. Are they talking about their plans for cruises? And if so, how many people are doing it?
Yeah, we want to look at that. So we really looked at two things. The first at LikeFolio we checked out was cruise line consumer demand. And for this, this is people talking about actually booking a trip with a cruise line. And we see a nice little quarter-over-quarter uptick. Nothing like we have seen in the past, still down considerably on a year-over-year basis. But it's been down and down and down. Now we're getting a little uptick, so that's good. Still at very depressed levels, nothing compared to what we're seeing on flying for leisure, where we're seeing flying for leisure up 97% quarter over quarter. So 35% for booking a cruise, 97% for flying for leisure. And what we wanted to do then was say, all right, so is this really symbolic of less demand than flying, or is there something else here? And I think Jenny really summed this up really nicely. A lot of this is simply regulatory. There's just nothing to book because the ships aren't allowed really to leave port at this point. So we look then at consumer happiness for cruise lines. And what's really interesting here is that for the two major players we're talking about today, we see both of those having rebounded very sharply up to almost pre-pandemic levels of consumer happiness. So the concerns around being on a cruise, all of those negatives that became so paramount when we saw, I think it was called the Diamond Princess Cruise Line, at the very beginning of this, a lot of those fears have been assuaged, and vaccines has a lot to do with it. It being a year later has a lot to do with it, and it looks like to us with this strong levels of consumer happiness around talking about cruises, it tells us that there is significant pent-up demand. It tells us that people aren't as fearful as they were 3 months, 6 months ago, and people are ready to get back out on the water.
Andy, do you feel when you're looking at the data, and I think Alex made a really good point here, that first cruise ship to leave a port out of some port of Florida or something like that, won't that be the final determining factor that the United States and the world by itself is back from this pandemic? Because cruise lines were probably the most maligned during this because of the story that you just told, how people were stuck on the cruise ship and the infection was spreading throughout the boat. Once that happens, once they become, safe again and that cruise ship leaves the port, isn't that one of the final obstacles for this world and economy to get back on track, to see one of those cruise ships leaving a port? Your thoughts on that?
I think it would be absolutely very symbolic. I think it would be, something that, if Ron DeSantis himself isn't down there, on the Bon Voyage party, that would be a huge missed opportunity. I think there's going to be a lot of risk with that. I think all eyes will be on whoever leaves first and that group coming back. But yes, I do think that will be a incredibly symbolic moment, because there's just something very visual about thousands of people getting onto a boat and saying, we're comfortable doing this. We're back to what we like to do. Even if you're not a cruise ship guy or lady, you know what that means. And I think we all do. And I think we're all hoping that it does happen sooner than the November timeline I think that they've given us so far.
Andy, the one thing that just jumps off the screen to me is how high, not where necessarily the consumer sentiment is even now, which is incredible to see that recovery, but how high it was pre-pandemic. Because I'm admittedly not a cruise ship guy. I've never been on one. I don't necessarily have plans to, at least in the near term. But maybe I'm missing something, because it seems like those who go on them, and I noticed that in my social circle from my parents and their friends, Everyone loves the time they have on these, and it looks like that's the same on something even like on Twitter, where people tend to complain about things in spite of all the negative headlines you read. Even prior to the pandemic, there was always negative headlines around cruise ships. People love these vacations, whether it's because they're affordable, accessible, whatever it may be. It's incredible. Is this one of the highest rated industries in terms of consumer sentiment of all of them?
Yeah, certainly in travel, it is. I mean, everything else is, people love to complain about, but people do have a very good time on these ships. I think Kevin's right. All price points, people tend to enjoy it. People that talk about themselves not being a cruise ship guy, generally speaking, haven't been on a cruise ship. So I think that you're probably right that maybe you are missing something. It's one of those things. It's like once you drive a Tesla, you know what it's like to drive a Tesla. Once you've been on a Peloton, you understand what it's like to be on a Peloton. It's kind of tough to describe. It's not perfect by any means, but the convenience factor is extreme, and the ability to vacation without really having to drive anywhere and still see different things and all that is really good. And the food sometimes is really good. So, people like it. People like it a lot, and they talk very positively about their experiences when they're on there. And so, seeing that enthusiasm in the LikeFolio data, the consumer happiness data, coming back into these names tells me that people are ready. People are ready to get back out there, especially those that typically go on a cruise every single year.
Andy, do you like one of these two names better than the other? Is this an industry that you're looking for potential investments in one way or another, or is this one that you're waiting for that first ship to sail? Thoughts from a LikeFolio standpoint on maybe a call for this industry or one of these names in particular?
Just generally speaking, I like to go with the more expensive price point options on something like this. So I would prefer a Royal Caribbean to a Carnival Cruise Lines. I think they've got a little bit more motivation to get into the water. But right now, it's kind of all one basket, and it probably should be. Since the ships aren't leaving anyway, it doesn't matter that much. But I would say probably like Royal a little better, but it's a tough call.